Welcome to the Hidden Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Homer Hargrove, and we are going to talk about some reflections and insights I've had from this past couple weeks. And as you know, many of you know, from a couple weeks ago, I made an announcement that this podcast is going to have a shift from where we're no longer going to be just talking about leadership, but we're going to go into this direction of talking about growth and connection and finding meaning in kind of those everyday moments of our lives. And today I want to share a couple stories with you and thoughts that have been on my heart. So one major challenge that has been stretching me this past couple weeks is at a specific recovery center that I've been going to, kind of had like a very peculiar response to me going. There was pretty much a situation where it seemed like there's a possibility, we're just doing hearsay now, but there's like a possibility of certain techs kind of like downing the group that didn't like the idea of the group. Well, usually most people like me. There's a couple techs that had this idea that a spiritual group shouldn't have been necessary, and they're actually not really telling people to go to the group. And it was like kind of obvious because there was a dramatic change in the groups that I was having. I went from almost all the clients going to virtually no clients going. And it was right when there was a shift in staff that where this happened. So anyway, to make a long story short, the group became mandatory because the clinical director really believed in the groups that I was hosting. And so it's this great opportunity for people to try to find this connection to like their faith and their recovery. And I'm a really reasonable person as I go through the group, so it really just fits well. I've been doing this for several years, right? And so anyway, I start having just like bad group sessions to where I'm not saying like I'm the best speaker in the world, but generally I give a good talk and people have great feedback and give have really good response to the message. And when you're a professional speaker, like you can tell when the audience is engaging with the message or not. And there's just like this shift to where all of a sudden I have the room full of people there. And as I'm giving the message, I'm just noticing that people seem like pissed off and like irritated. And I'm feeling like really confused because I've done this message literally hundreds of times at different recovery centers, even at this recovery center. And I'm kind of feeling confused at why the clients are responding this way. And there's almost like no engagement. I do feedback at the end. It was like a really, really low level response to where I was really surprised and taken back. And to top it off, like this specific day, I had injured my back. And some of you guys who follow me online, y'all saw that. Y'all sent some prayers. Thank you. I had like injured my back. And by the end of this day, I was like really hurting. And so truth be told, it was also not like my best, quote unquote performance. But it was still not to the level of where I feel like it should have been. And so the whole experience felt like a total bomb. Like I don't generally feel like I bombed a talk, but I felt like I bombed the talk. Like I was in pain. I was in physical pain, got through this talk and didn't feel like anyone engaged, anyone responded. And I thought, well, maybe it was just me. Well, then I go again next week, and it's kind of like a similar response. But this time I was like really trying to engage. And I noticed like a level of difference. But one thing that I kept feeling was like there's this like almost like this defense or this wall that I didn't understand why was there. And pretty much, I ended up finding out through like conversations and through the way that certain clients were talking. At one point, one of the clients said, "Well, I wouldn't normally be this defensive or etc. if I wasn't forced to be here." And I was like, "Oh, that's really weird because all this time people never have responded with this way." And so again, trying to make a long story short, found out that the shift in staff, we're not necessarily keeping clients accountable to going to any of their groups. And this was one group in the evening that they were being held accountable to. So even though it's kind of like the norm that they would go to these groups, they were growing accustomed to not having to go to groups. And so it created this unnatural stigma just for my group, even though it was a custom for everyone. So anyway, once I realized this, again, I was feeling so confused before, kind of felt like I got to the bottom of it, but it also made me realize a couple of different things because one, this group went from being an optional group to being a flat out required group, which is not necessarily something I was used to. And so generally I don't I have like kind of a, like my song and dance, if you will, of how I go lead into my talks. But it's generally a lot more relaxed when it's, it was people's choice to go there. It's not like there's a lot more sense of relax and willing to receive when it didn't feel like they were forced to go to like this churchy group. And so I realized I had to kind of go like the extra mile to break down these walls that they had built up. Because, I had to step out of myself so that I'm like, okay, so now this explains why they're feeling frustrated. They're thinking that they have to go to, that it's now mandatory to go to church. Like that's the way that they're seeing it. And even though it's like a 5-lesson guide that I take people on when it comes to like spiritual exploration, they're just seeing it as like, oh, this guy, this preachy pastor guy is coming here to talk to me about church and Jesus, and I don't want to have anything a part of it, because they probably most of the time have like this pre-assumption of what the pastor is, who he is, where I come from. And so now I realize that I have to, they pretty much have built this structure of what the group is like and who's the person leading the group before they have ever even met me or heard anything I had to say. So now when I go in, I'm thinking, how can I break down this wall or this structure and build it back up again in a way that's more accurate? Because nothing, if I'm being, everything that I say is being funneled through this net of kind of like vial, like this net of wanting to be defensive and not wanting to hear what I have to say. That's really hard to overcome, to where I could even say all the right things, but because they're looking as like I'm forced to be here, they're not going to receive it. So I made this like little shift to where I just had this idea like, well, now I'm going to give like a really, I want to lay like a more powerful foundation at the beginning of even who I am. Because before I would say generally who I was, and then within the talk, I kind of reveal a little bit of my story, my testimony, reveal that I'm also in recovery. But now at this specific place, I started laying down this blanket of I'm in recovery. I've been X amount of years in recovery. I'm a Christian. I'm not here to force you to be a Christian, but I'm going to talk about, X, Y, and Z. And I kind of built up this like, again, like this little song and dance to say at the beginning, to really try to drop that guard back down. And I've been working on it for a couple of weeks of like trying to get a little bit better. And I got to say that like last night I did this group and it went great. It was so good. And it was just like, it worked, and it was this moment where I got to reflect and see, like, I'll be honest, there's a couple of weeks where it's like I was having a bad group after bad group, and it does not feel good to have a whole talk prepared, have your heart into it, be praying about it, and feel like you bomb multiple times in a row. And so there's a part of me that felt like discouraged. It was like, maybe I should just quit this group, or maybe I should tell the director that it shouldn't be mandatory, all these different things. But once I kind of like gathered myself and was able to kind of like reinstill confidence and go about it, like, how can I attack it the way it is rather than trying to change this or that? What can I change first to make this the most best possible outcome? And it worked, and it really helped. It really encouraged me to be able to see like that, those positive results. And it was kind of like this moment where I was able to refresh myself and even get better at something that I do. And it's after doing it for so many years, there's these moments where it's not that you've like consciously consider that you've maxed out your ability, that you're at the cap of your skill level. But there's moments where you kind of just feel like, well, I'm doing good. And this was like this moment where challenge, this at first just a problem, became a challenge and helped me to get better at something. And it was just like this powerful moment where it made me excited. It made me feel excited about not only about this group, but even more confident about groups to come and in different speaking engagements to come. And just another tool in that belt to be able to reach people with this message that I want to share. So again, I appreciate you guys hearing out this challenge for me and how it really helped me to grow in this moment. At the time, it didn't feel like I was like feeling tough. It was feeling tough, but we worked through it. Another moment I wanted to share with you guys before we wrap up is something that really made me smile this week. And it was actually at our church service, and just being able to see different people volunteering and helping. And it was just kind of like one of those moments where I reflected is like, man, people believe in this mission, and people believe in what they're doing. They're connected to something, and it just kind of like touched my heart, because my heart in starting the church was starting this community of people with like-minded faith for this purpose of connecting with God and each other as they live transparent lives. And it was like this moment where I just felt like, man, we're doing it. We're fulfilling this mission. And even more transparently, one moment that really made me smile, even made me cry, was during worship at our church. My wife and I were praying at the front to pray for people. And as we were there, in a position to pray for others, there's just like this random moment where I had thought about how years ago I thought about how I would literally be at the altar crying and praying for God to send me a wife. And there's this moment where I felt just like, at the time I felt so like alone, wanting my best friend. It's like I felt like that best friend was out there for me, but I hadn't met them yet. And I would literally cry at the altar praying for the time to come for me to meet my future wife. And here I was standing during worship next to this answered prayer. And it just brought so much joy to my soul, like I just really felt good. And I'm not trying to sound like, like ooey gooey and mushy, but it just like really was this moment where I recognized this powerful answered prayer in my life. And it was awesome. So again, these are just some kind of some highs that I wanted to share with you guys today. And as we keep going in this direction as a podcast, I know that we had kind of a dry spell as I was trying to kind of reorchestrate how we do this podcast. I also launched another podcast that goes hand in hand with my new book, Forever and Ever, a marriage book. But as we go forward, I want to continue to share like these kinds of reflections and insights from my life with you. And we'll continue to have different people that come on the show and share their thoughts and their insights, their life. But again, I appreciate you guys being with me on this journey. Until next time, have a great life. Well, there you have it. I hope that this episode was meaningful and edifying for your leadership and your growth within your ministry and organization. Could you do me a favor? Could you leave a rating and review for this podcast? It'd really help me out and help others be able to see this show in their feed. You can also visit homerhargrove.com to be able to learn more, connect, or become one of our supporters. Until next time, have a great life.